Hi, I'm Miss King. I'm your instructor for Math 171. And this welcome video is to introduce you to everything that's involved in the course and make sure that you kind of understand the routine for things and how I'll run things right from the very beginning so that there's no confusion. So even though you've already seen the syllabus, I want to direct your attention to the condensed syllabus linked right here because it has all the important information, um, but just condensed and not as long as the first syllabus that you probably looked at. So I'm just gonna pull that up. So here's some of the things that are important to note in the condensed syllabus. My office is on main campus. It's in building 6, room 6115. My office hours in person are Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 a.m. and they are virtually at 11 a.m. on Zoom. So there's a link here that you can click on, or if you print this out and want to use the QR code, that's fine too. You can also call my office phone. I'll answer it if I'm in the office. If not, you can leave a message that I'll be able to access anytime. And then here is my email address. All right, so first thing that's going to be important for you to know is how attendance is going to work, since this is an online course and you're clearly not attending in person. So the school says that if you miss more than 15% of the days for a course, you're going to be withdrawn. And the way that I count attendance is I look at each section that we study and I look at each exam and I count each of those as one day. So participating in the section, participating in each exam, that counts as a day. So that's approximately 30 different days that I'll be taking attendance. So if you are marked absent, which means in this case that you did not complete the section that we studied or you did not complete the exam, then you'll get marked absent. And the maximum amount you can do that is 4.5 times, and then you'll automatically be withdrawn. I don't automatically withdraw students without talking to them first, so I would be reaching out to you ahead of time. So the way that I make sure that you've done a section is I have posted notes and instructional videos for each section that we cover in the textbook, and you have to take those notes and then submit pictures of them online. And then once you do that, then I'll know you participated in that section. So those notes are for attendance purposes only, they are not for a grade. Now there's 3 ways you can take the notes. There is a document that I'll show you in a second that has all of the notes for the entire semester, and you can print that out now ahead of time and just have all of the notes so that you can physically write on them. You could also take a digital copy, just save the PDF to like a tablet or computer or whatever, and if you're able to write on that digital copy, then you can submit the notes from the digital copy each time you have to submit your notes. The worst option that I do not recommend is to take notes on your own notebook paper. The reason I don't recommend this is that I put out those notes for you guys to save time. So if you do the notes on your own notebook paper, you have to include everything. You have to include all the steps that I've pre-written out, all the definitions that I've put, all the graphs that are on there. And all those graphs, if you write them on notebook paper, they have to be written on graph paper. All the graphs in this course have to be written on graph paper in order to receive credit. So I do not recommend handwriting your own notes, but of course you can do that if you want to. All right, we have a few grade categories for this course. One is just homework assignments, my math lab assignments. So in this course, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in the welcome video later on, we use an outside source to the class called My Math Lab. It goes along with your textbook. In fact, My Math Lab has a digital copy of the textbook, so you don't need a physical copy. And so all the assignments are through My Math Lab, which is a paid subscription that you have to do. It's not part of the Cengage arrangement that the college has with some other textbooks. This is with Pearson, which is different. So you have to have My Math Lab, and the assignments are done on My Math Lab. So you submit your answers there. So the way that I grade these is I give you 2 assignment grades per 1 assignment. You have to see the problems on My Math Lab and do the work. And when you submit the answers on My Math Lab, you'll get 1 grade there that's for accuracy. Your second grade is going to be you writing out the work for each problem on a separate sheet of notebook paper and graph paper, and then submitting that work on Moodle. So you get 2 grades for each assignment, one on MyMathLab, one on Moodle. Each week we'll cover probably 2 sections of material or 1 section of material and then have an exam. And the days that we have 2 sections that we cover, the first section will be due on Thursday at 11:59 p.m. and the second will be due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. You can space it out differently, you can submit them early, but that's the deadline for each of those. It's possible that I'll give you a small portion of the homework assignments in the form of worksheets, but maybe not. So all work, no matter what, all work for every single problem needs to be shown. The next section we have is quizzes. This is not a typo, it is only 2% of your grade. I'm going to give a quiz once per chapter in MyMathLab, and those quizzes will be timed. The purpose of a quiz is kind of twofold. One is to give you a chance to see what test questions could look like and how I would grade them. And the second, for the 2% of your grade, is for me to see which students are going to try to cheat in this course and catch it early when it's only 2% of your grade. If you look at the next section, you can see the tests are 60%, and so those are a much bigger chunk. That's why I'm hoping that if any student is going to try to cheat in this course, that I'll catch it with the quiz and make sure that you're aware of the things that I look out for, specifically using internet resources, using Desmos, you should not be using that, using AI of any sort if you're Googling a problem, whatever. So when you take a quiz or a test, you can always use a scientific or graphing calculator. You cannot use Desmos, but calculators are fine. And as we go through the notes, I'll be teaching you how to do things there. Tests are going to be 60% of the grade, and they're open during a 24-hour period. So I will open a test at midnight, and then I will close it at 11:59 p.m. the following night. So it will be open for 24 hours. Tests will always be timed. The test days, I'm pretty sure for the entire course, are always on Fridays. So if that day doesn't work for you, just send me an email and let me know that taking the test on that day isn't going to work, and then we'll figure out another day. It could be a weekend day if that's all that's available to you. It could be a Monday. We'll figure out another day that's around the original test day where you can get that test done. So as long as you contact me ahead of time, like more than 24 hours ahead of time, we can make that work. I do not do makeup tests for the most part. Maybe if you have a medical reason and a doctor's note, I might, but for the most part, if you miss a test, you'll get a 0 in the meantime, and then when you take the final at the end of the course, that final will replace the missed test. This will only happen for 1 test. So I'm not going to do it for multiple. Don't miss 5 tests. If you miss all 5 tests, then you're just going to have zeros for all 5 of them. So, but for the very first one, I'll give you a grade based on the final exam. The next section is for slow quizzes. Slow quizzes are student learning objectives, I believe is what they stand for. This is something we have to do to get data for the school. So this is 3%. It should be the same for all math instructors across Vance Granville. And there's 2 of them. They'll be given at the end of the semester. I might give them a little bit earlier so that they are given around the time that you learn that material. But they're not typical quizzes. You don't have to do work to submit. You can try each problem twice. They're not going to be timed. So they're going to be a lot more laid back feeling for you guys. And then the final exam is going to be 15% of your grade. All right, next I wanted to talk about tutoring. Vance Granville has free tutoring for students through Upswing. There is like the tutoring on campus that is available like during school hours that you can always come and get help from. And then Upswing is where the online tutoring can be found, and it's completely free to you, and I believe it's available 24/7. So if you get on at 3 a.m. or whatever, you've procrastinated and you need to study last minute, you should be able to do that. So I would look into this tutoring opportunity as soon as you start to struggle, or if you know that you struggle with math, then I would start to look into it now so that you just have it set up when you really need it. In this course, the main issue that I find is that students use outside resources at inappropriate times. So outside resources would be something like you're Googling the problem. You plug it into ChatGPT or whatever and say, like, solve this for me. You can do that on homework as a method of learning. So I think probably the most effective way to learn would be to talk to a human person and get some tutoring. But if you're struggling with a problem and you need to see how to do it, obviously you can interact with AI and learn how to do that problem. AI is not usually going to give you the most student-friendly way of doing the problem, but in a pinch, it's better than nothing. So when you are completing your homework, your MyMathLab assignments, it is totally fine for you to use outside resources to learn how to do the math, to learn how to do the problem. What is not allowed is then using those outside resources on an assessment. So by the time you take the assessment, I'm asking what you learned, what's in your brain. At this point, I should not be seeing anything that is consistent with AI use. So along with this, if you have taken notes in the class and you don't like how I do something and you've been using AI to tutor you, or you've been using a human tutor, and you learned another method for how to do something, you need to turn in what I call an alternate method form, and I'll show you where those are. And that is basically your opportunity before the assessment to prove that you do know how to do this a different way, you learned it a different way. And so when I see that different method on your paper, it's not because you Googled it during the assessment, it's because you learned it ahead of time. So that's the purpose of that. I'll get more into that in a little bit. If I suspect that you've used an outside resource, you will be required to give detailed verbal explanations of your work, and you may be required to take the assessment, and this will be happening virtually by meeting with me on Zoom. So if you are required to give detailed explanations, that'll be a conversation on Zoom. If you have to complete a retake of the test, you will be doing that retake verbally with me, which means you will be talking me through every single problem so that I know when you're doing this virtually, you're not looking at a solution online, but you're actually explaining what you already know. If you do not meet with me to retake the test within 2 weeks of me notifying you that I had a suspicion that you used an outside resource, you'll automatically receive a score of 0, and that score of 0 will stay. So typically, once I have flagged your work as potentially using an outside resource, I'll just put a 0 in the grade book, and then that 0 will only be fixed when you meet with me if we can decide that that was work that you actually did. If you use different methods or your score on the retake differs significantly from the original score, then I say that that retake is evidence of use of outside resources. If you were to use identical methods and you clearly understood what you were doing and the score on the retake is similar to the original score, then I just take the higher of the 2 grades and use it as an assessment grade in that case, because that means I was wrong. My suspicion was wrong. All right, next, I want to take a look at the course schedule. So here on the course schedule, you can see just the general flow. The first week, we're going to cover sections 1.3 and 1.4. 1.3 is due by Thursday, the 21st. 1.4 is due by Sunday, the 24th, always due by 11:59 p.m. Again, the next week, we're going to cover 2 sections, due by Thursday, due by Sunday. And then the third week, we're going to cover 1 section, which will be due by Thursday. There's an exam review that I recommend, but is not required. You're not going to be turning it in. And then the chapter 1 exam is on Friday of that week, and you'll have 24 hours to take it. So it will open midnight Thursday night and then be open all day on Friday and then close Friday at 11:59 p.m. And so you can see, if you look through here, that's just the general flow for every section, every chapter of the course until we get to the final exam. The final exam is on December 12th, which again is a Friday. So go ahead and take a look at all of these things, all these due dates, and just make sure that this is there's nothing going on in your personal life that would make it so you couldn't complete one of the exams or would make any of the sections hard. So just reach out to me if there's anything that you know about your schedule that's going to potentially have an issue with the schedule that I've put forth. All right, next I want to show you the course documents. So this is a link that will take you to all of the notes and all of the unit reviews for the entire course. I recommend saving it so you can write on it virtually or printing it ahead of time so that you just have all of the notes available as we go through each section. Here is some graph paper. There's graph paper that is on an actual coordinate axis that's labeled from -10 to 10, so that can be kind of helpful, or graph paper that's just squares. Either way, you either need to buy graph paper or print this ahead of time because you will need it to do the course. All right, next we have the supplemental technologies for this course, which is MyMathLab. So you need to go to mymathlab.com or pearson.com and pull up MyMathLab. There's a course code for this course, which is listed right here. There are links down here which will talk you through all the different ways that you can sign up for MyMathLab depending on what your experience with it has been before. So if you've never used MyMathLab for a class, you can look at creating a MyMathLab account. There's steps there and there's pictures. If you've already used MyMathLab, then you can join the course from an existing account. If you purchased your book from the school bookstore, they might have given you a receipt, like printed out a receipt, and then there's typically a code highlighted at the bottom. That code is not for your textbook for this course. It brings you to something called RedShelf, and when you go to RedShelf, then you can take that code and plug it in, and then RedShelf will give you your actual code for this class. So whatever it was that they printed is not the correct thing. If you look at this link, it will lead you through how to use the code from the bookstore to find the new code for the actual textbook and for MyMathLab. And then we have a troubleshooting guide if you need it and some support. They're typically pretty helpful with students. All right, I'm gonna direct your attention to some other important information. So here we'll come back to this in a second about PDFs, but if you click on tutoring on the menu, then you can see that same information that's in the condensed syllabus on how to sign up for free tutoring through Vance Granville. Here is the alternate methods form that I talked about before. So here's a tutorial that just talks you through how to fill out the form, what's included, so that when you go to fill out the form, you won't be surprised. But basically what you'll be doing is you'll be taking your cell phone and recording, just holding it up above your hand and recording yourself saying, like this, we learned how to factor in class, but I don't factor using the same method as Miss King. I use this other method. And you would just talk me through maybe a minute video of you going through a problem using that. And then you would submit that video. And so that's how you're going to show to me ahead of time that you know how to do an alternate method and you plan on using that alternate method on an assessment. One thing that I want to clarify or stress about this is that when you use an alternate method, it should be that same method every single time. So if I look, if you factor a specific way that's different than how I do it, then when I look at your homework, you should be using that method. When I look at your quiz for the chapter, you should be using that method. And when I look at your chapter test, I should see that same method. If that is how you solve it, then it should be consistent. The reason I do this is because students who are using Google or using ChatGPT to look things up on the day of the test, they typically do it a slightly different way every time because they never learned it. They're only copying down what they see online. So if I see that from you, that's an indicator that an outside resource has been used, and I will flag you for potential cheating. All right, so I just want to be as transparent as possible from the beginning about what my expectations are. So here's a video where I just walk myself through the process and show you exactly what to do, and then here's the form itself. Next, we have the actual modules. They're all laid out the same. I put all the modules up for the first chapter so that if you need to work ahead based on your schedule, you'll be able to do that. So you can see the objectives of what we're going to be learning. And then here, we're always going to have the instructional video first. I made it. That's me speaking. You'll see my hand in the video and leading you through these notes. You only need to click on this if you do not print the notes ahead of time. So if you need to print them one section at a time, you can do that. These next two links are where you can submit your work. So when you're done with the notes, when you're done with the assignment on MyMathLab, you're going to have work written down, and that work needs to be submitted. When you submit that work, it needs to be submitted as a PDF. I don't take any other file types, only PDFs, and it has to be submitted as a single PDF. If you have 5 pictures of work, I don't want 5 files, I want 1. So to learn how to submit or create a PDF so you can submit it, you can come up here where it says PDF, and I'll talk you through how to create PDF files using your iPhone or an Android, depending on what you have. If you have multiple PDFs, you've got 5 different files because you had 5 pages of work, then here's a link that will talk you through how to take those files and merge them together into a single file. So this is going to be really important. Typically, students struggle the very first time they submit something, and then it becomes easy. So when you submit your notes, when you submit your work, they need to be single PDF files when you submit them, and they're due, again, the first assignment is due on Thursday at 11:59 p.m. The second one is going to be due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So make sure you reach out if you need help on creating a PDF if what I explained doesn't make sense. The other thing I want to stress about these is that some problems ask you to graph. They say sketch the graph for this, and then on MyMathLab, you can pick a multiple choice answer that has the graph, but for you, since it told you to sketch the graph, you should still have a graph sketched on graph paper. Always on graph paper. If you sketch a graph on notebook paper, I will pretend you didn't turn it in and I will give you a 0 for that problem. So make sure anytime it asks you to sketch a graph that you do on graph paper and you submit that as part of your work. No matter how that answer is submitted on MyMathLab, it needs to be written on graph paper and submitted here on Moodle as part of the work that supports the assignment. Okay, what I'm going to do next is go to MyMathLab, and this is gonna, I'm just typing it in, MyMathLab. So mymathlab.com. It didn't pull up for me when I just did that, so I'm going to Pearson instead, which is just a longer roundabout way to get to MyMathLab, but mymathlab.com usually works. I'll say it now since that was a good opportunity for it. If you are struggling with MyMathLab on the browser that you have open, like I'm using Google Chrome, you can try using Firefox as well. That's another browser that typically works with MyMathLab. And if it's not working, if it's still being glitchy, go ahead and clear the cache on your computer, and you can Google how to do that. But that will usually help make it so you can actually sign in. So I'm just going to walk through this sign-in process so you guys can see what to expect when you get into MyMathLab. All right, so if you're doing it from the student view, this is what you would be pulling up each time. And so if you look at this calendar, you can see today on the 18th, a bunch of assignments are starting, and then one is ending on the 21st, one is ending on the 24th, one is ending on the 28th. And so here's all these assignments. So the first week, do Thursday, do Sunday, do Thursday, do Sunday. So we're following that pattern that I explained when we went over the schedule. And if you click on that, here are your questions that you'll be going through. So each question you can just click through as you do them. So anything like this where it says, then graph the circle, that needs to be graphed on graph paper and submitted with your work for this. So you'll be going through and you'll be typing in answers for each of the problems, and then overall submitting the problem There are 10 of them. There are 10 of them for this assignment, turning in all 10 problems on MyMathLab, and then going and taking your physical work and turning that in on Moodle. If you want to use the actual, if you want to use the actual textbook, you can go over here to chapter contents. Chapter 1 is where we're starting, section 1.3, and you can view the multimedia e-text, and then you'll be accessing the textbook. So here's our textbook. You can flip through the pages down here. You could go in here and type, like, let's see, A21 like this. This is where the answers are for the odd problems. So that's always good to be able to find. It was page 102, I think. Yep, there we go. So this is the section that we're going to start working on. If you look over here, you can see recommended problems. So if you're struggling and you need some extra problems to practice with, here they are. And then I always tell you what page the answers for those problems will start on. All right, I think that's everything. So welcome to the course. I hope this is a course that you're successful in and that you find all the materials and resources that you need. If you struggle with anything, go ahead and reach out and ask me whatever question you have.